In the video I posted a few minutes ago, I presented 3 evidences that Kefir, Mishka Production, and Brickworks Games are all working together. Even if that video leaves you a skeptic, I think it is safe to say that the evidence is overwhelming enough that it is more reasonable to believe that they are than they are not. In this video, I will be presenting 6 evidences for why I think that Mishka Production and Brickworks Games are really just names and that everything is essentially just Kefir. I will also be arguing why I think this is a brilliant move by Kefir and how we should respond as players of those games. The first piece of evidence, which was mentioned in my other video, is that it seems that all of the customer support agents for all 3 companies live in either Volgograd or St. Petersburg, which happens to be the location of Kefir's 2 main offices. Some of these sources may not be reliable, but some of them I trust. Now, Volgograd and St. Petersburg are not small cities, so it is conceivable that this is a coincidence, but it serves as some evidence. The second piece of evidence was also touched on in the last video, which has to do with money. Last Day on Earth makes around $46,000 a day, which equals around $17 million a year. So buying the rights to use even just the game code for a game that was doing that well would cost at least $25 million. The only companies that I've ever heard of doing anything like this are big name brand companies that can use their fame to make sure they make enough money to profit. Those companies also reserve millions of dollars for advertising to make sure their games skyrocket. Mishka Production and Brickworks Games are not name brand companies, nor have they spent almost anything on advertising. This brings me to the third piece of evidence for why I believe they are just names and that everything is Kefir. Both of these companies originated when their game was released and start with nothing. They have no website, they had no company information anywhere. If I were going to create a fake company within my company that I didn't want them to know was part of my company, I would set it up this way. This isn't a strong piece of evidence, but again, it's a factor. The fourth evidence is the fact that neither of these companies are hiring employees. Their games are growing rapidly, but they don't ever solicit for new employees. On the other hand, Kefir has been soliciting for new employees since I started playing Last Day on Earth 9 months ago. Why do they need so many employees when those other games do not? This brings us to the fifth piece of evidence. Previously, I have suggested that the reason why Last Day on Earth has been slow with updates is because they are focusing more on multiplayer. And I'm sure that's partially true, but recently I made a connection that made me stop and think. Last Day on Earth was coming up with crazy awesome updates almost every week for several months. Bunker updates, all kinds of different events, and then it started to slow down mid to late October. Jurassic Survival was released on the second week of November. And then it seemed like Jurassic Survival was the game coming out with lots of different events each week. And then around mid-January, it seemed like Jurassic Survival was starting to resort more and more to quest bait to stall for time. And then on February 16th, Grim Soul Survival was released, and they already have their first major update coming out here soon. I think this implies that the same employees are working on the same games. Now that the games are up and running, I imagine they will start balancing out which games they focus on. Veronica just told me the other day that she's excited about the next few updates for Last Day on Earth because she thinks that people will finally stop bothering her with the question about when is the next big update coming. The last piece of evidence is how they act. All of them use the same tactics of creating a game that seems complete but calls itself a beta so that when you find out that it is in fact not complete, you will say, oh, that's why they said it was a beta. This is a unique way of thinking which may become commonplace in the future, but it is definitely not now. I think the fact that all 3 companies act in this unique manner is strong evidence that they are all the same people. There are a lot of other small evidences, but these are the main ones. In addition to this evidence, the 7th reason I believe this is true is because it is absolutely brilliant. Think about it for a second. Kefir comes up with this amazing concept that we all love and it makes millions of dollars. They could just sit around and wait for other companies to use their concept and create their own version of the game, or they could use some of the millions of dollars that they're making and create their own variations better and faster than anyone else could, because they don't have to worry about copyright laws. They become their own strongest competition, which makes them more money. Now, some of you might feel a strong objection to this and say, yeah, but they haven't even completed the first game that I've already spent my time and my money into. I don't care that this makes them more money. I'm frustrated that this is taking away their employees to work on these other games, which is valid, and I understand why you're frustrated. And it's probably the reason they've kept it a secret. But this is a long-term move for them, and I think we're going to be really happy about this in about a year. Here's why. By creating 3 games, this allows them to eventually develop 3 teams of people working on the same project. If they spend a lot of time working on a bear design, they can use that for all 3 games if they want to. This also allows them to try out 3 times as many events and see what people like. We all like the Smuggler's Camp, so they turned it into a wall quest. When they finish multiplayer for Last Day on Earth and work out the kinks, it is precisely because they use the same coding that they can easily implement it into the other games. I'm personally excited about seeing some version of Mad Dog's Arena and Last Day on Earth. I think it's going to be a really fun multiplayer event. I've already noticed them do this with some of the changes that are harder to catch. For example, the changes they made for how your game saves with the server in Last Day on Earth that may or may not have caused the loot me incident. Once they got everything up and running there, they implemented it into Jurassic Survival, and then Grim Soul Survival started out with it. This also assures us that Kefir is not lazy or working slow like so many people have assumed. They are in fact producing a crazy amount of updates. And while it might be frustrating right now because it is slowing down the progress of their main game, Last Day on Earth, once they fully develop those 3 teams and those teams get good at sharing with each other, we will not only experience more updates, but those updates will be much higher quality because some of them will have been tested out on their other games and then improved. In conclusion, I think this is an awesome long-term decision by Kefir, and if you guys have the time, I would suggest checking out their other 2 games, because giving them feedback on those games will indirectly help whichever game is your favorite. I personally recommend Grim Soul Survival. They've tried a lot of new things in this version of their game, and it is fantastic. But even if you don't have time to play those other games, I still recommend watching videos about those games, because whatever they are testing out in those games could likely show up in the future in your game. Well, that's it guys. Hope that helps. See you next time.